help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. In this video, he thought she was on a business trip, but when he checked the hotel she claimed to be staying at, what he found shattered everything he believed about their marriage. Stay with this one because the twist at the end will leave you questioning everything. Brian stood by the front door, holding Melissa's suitcase as she fastened her coat and adjusted her scarf. It was early morning, the sun barely up, and the silence in their kitchen felt heavier than usual. She smiled at him, that same polished, warm smile she always used when she didn't want to answer too many questions. "I'll text you when I land," she said, taking the suitcase and giving him a soft kiss on the cheek. "You're gonna crush that presentation," he told her, though something inside him whispered not to believe a word. Melissa worked in marketing. Traveling for conferences was nothing new. But this time, something felt off. As she closed the car door and pulled out of the driveway, Brian watched from the front steps, sipping his coffee. There was no reason to doubt her, and yet, a tiny crack had formed, barely noticeable, but enough to let the doubt slip through. At 10:12 a.m. Brian received a photo from Melissa. She was holding a coffee cup near an airport window with the caption, "Delayed but surviving, love you." He smiled and texted back a heart, but when he zoomed in on the photo, he noticed something strange. The gate behind her didn't say Chicago at all. It said, "Private Charter, Terminal B." Brian told himself it was probably just a connecting flight or an error, but that whisper inside him, it was growing louder. It told him something didn't add up. That night, when she didn't answer his call, it took everything in him not to spiral. When she texted, "Going to bed early, long day. I'll call you tomorrow," he responded, "Love you," and put his phone down face down. But in the pit of his stomach, he already knew something wasn't right. Stay with the story. In the next part, Brian finds something in the trash that turns suspicion into undeniable truth. Coming up next. The next morning, Brian stood over the kitchen sink, tossing coffee grounds into the trash, when a small crumpled piece of paper caught his eye. It wasn't the usual grocery list or receipt from the gas station. It was from a hotel, the Briarwood Inn, dated yesterday, with a room number and a signature. Melissa Carter. His heart stuttered. The Briarwood wasn't in Chicago. It was a cozy, discreet hotel only 40 minutes from their house. Known more for weekend flings than business meetings, Brian stared at the receipt like it had fangs. Everything about yesterday rushed back in, her distant tone, the flight delay, the terminal name in the background. He opened his phone and searched the Briarwood Inn, pulled up the number, and just stared at it. Was he about to cross a line? Or was that line already crossed without him? He finally called. A woman with a smooth voice answered, and when he asked, "Hi, I think my wife may have left something in room 214 yesterday," there was a pause. Then she said, "Oh yes, Ms. Carter? She left a charger. I'll have it at the front desk." His blood turned to ice. She was there. There was no meeting in Chicago. No conference. She'd lied to his face. And just like that, the voice inside him wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming, but instead of confronting her, Brian made a choice. He'd gather every piece of truth before she had a chance to twist it. He grabbed his keys, started the car, and drove, not to the hotel, to his friend Sam's place. Sam, who worked IT security for a living. Because Brian didn't want to accuse Melissa, he wanted to prove it, and what they would discover that night would change everything. Up next, Brian gets access to Melissa's location history and finds out exactly where she's been and who she's been with. Brian sat at Sam's desk, heart pounding while his friend typed quickly, pulling up a private tool connected to Melissa's Google account. Melissa had once asked Brian to fix her email, and he'd saved her login on his laptop. Something she probably never noticed. Now, it gave him access to a digital map of her movements over the past 3 months. Sam leaned back, watching the location history populate. They scrolled through date after date, each dot on the map like a tiny stab in Brian's chest. At first, it looked like the usual grocery runs, gym, her office, but then came a pattern. Every second Wednesday, around noon, Melissa's phone would ping at a parking garage near the interstate. From there, it would go dark for 2 hours, and light up again at the Briarwood Inn. Not once, not twice, 5 separate visits. Brian's hands shook. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was evidence.
Sam hesitated.
"Want to know who she was with?" he asked. Brian looked up, eyes already glassy. "How?" Sam explained that if Melissa used apps like Uber, Venmo, or even shared location with anyone, they might be able to connect more dots. They checked her Venmo. She had paid someone named Tyler R- 5 times over the past 2 months, always on the same days she visited the hotel. Each payment was labeled innocently: coffee, thanks, miscellaneous. But Melissa didn't even drink coffee. Brian's breathing slowed. He didn't know a Tyler, not from her work, not from her friends. He clicked the profile. It was private, no picture, but Sam, ever the bloodhound, ran a reverse search on the username, and there it was, Tyler R. Tyler Rogers, a personal trainer at the same gym Melissa had joined last year. Brian stared at the screen, stunned. He remembered Melissa coming home after workouts, saying how much she hated lifting weights, but somehow, she always went. This Tyler wasn't some stranger. He was someone she saw regularly, smiled at, maybe even introduced Brian to once in passing. Brian's jaw tightened. The betrayal suddenly had a face. But the worst part? Melissa and Tyler were scheduled to meet again. Tomorrow. Coming up. Brian makes a decision. Confront her now or catch her in the act. Brian barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Melissa's smile. The same one she used on him. Probably the same one she used on Tyler. By morning, his mind was made up. He wasn't going to confront her with words. He was going to confront her with truth. Cold, undeniable truth. He messaged Sam and asked for one more favor. "Can you help me set up a camera?" Brian asked. Sam didn't even hesitate. "Tell me where and when." They planned everything to the minute. Sam had an old dashcam rig and a compact GoPro with motion detection. They didn't want a confrontation. They wanted proof. Brian knew Melissa's next gym session was at 11:30 a.m. At 11:20, they parked 2 blocks away from the Briarwood Inn. They watched from inside Sam's car as Melissa's SUV pulled into the lot. Right on time. She got out wearing her black leggings and a hoodie, hair in a ponytail, no makeup, like she always did for the gym. But instead of heading toward the gym, she walked across the lot and disappeared behind the hotel's rear entrance. Brian swallowed hard. There was no suitcase, no meeting, no business trip, just her and soon, most likely, him. While Melissa disappeared inside, Sam slipped out of the car. He hurried around the back, placed the GoPro near the service entrance, and aimed it at the only side door without a camera warning sign. If anyone came or left, they'd catch it. Brian didn't want to believe it would actually happen, that he'd see her again, walking out of that door with another man. But part of him needed it to be true now, because if it wasn't, then everything, the lies, the payments, the location data, all of it could still be explained away. And Melissa, she was that good with words, too good. They waited in silence for over an hour. Then, just before 1 p.m. the door opened. Out stepped Melissa, and she wasn't alone. Tyler followed, zipping up his jacket, laughing at something she'd said. Then, she reached up and kissed him. Not just a quick peck. It was slow, familiar, intimate, like she had done it 100 times before. Brian didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched. Something inside him broke, but he didn't show it. Not yet. He pulled out his phone and filmed from inside the car just for backup. Then he turned to Sam and whispered, "I'm going to make sure she never forgets this day." What exactly did he mean? What was Brian planning next? Keep watching, because in the next chapter, Brian goes from quiet witness to calculated revenge. Brian drove home with his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Melissa had no idea what he had just witnessed. She walked into their house that afternoon like nothing had happened. Same calm smile, same routine hug, same lie. "I'm exhausted," she said, dropping her gym bag by the door. "Leg day almost killed me." Brian simply nodded, watching her like a stranger. Every word out of her mouth now felt like poison dipped in sugar, but he didn't let it show. Not yet. He needed her to stay relaxed, to keep lying, because his plan was just beginning. That night, while Melissa took a long bath upstairs, Brian pulled up the footage on his laptop and watched it again. The kiss, the laughter, the casual familiarity between Melissa and Tyler, and worst of all, her comfort with it. There was no shame in her eyes.
No nerves glances.
It wasn't a fling, it was a routine. He transferred the video to a flash drive and labeled it only with one word, truth. Then he opened his notes app and began typing. Anniversary dinner, Saturday, 7:00 p.m., Bellagio's Steakhouse. Reservation under her name, private room. Sam brings the USB, Brian brings the comm. He knew Melissa would be thrilled when he told her he'd planned something special for their anniversary. She loved surprises, especially ones where she was the center of attention. But this year, she would be the center of attention, just not in the way she expected. Brian rehearsed his lines in the mirror, over and over again. He didn't want to yell. He didn't want to scream. He wanted her to crumble under the weight of her own betrayal. He wanted her to feel the exact same emotional gut punch he had felt watching her kiss another man outside a motel. The kind that steals your breath, the kind you never forget. But just when he thought he had it all under control, something changed. The next morning, he woke up to Melissa humming in the kitchen. Humming a tune he hadn't heard in years. It was their song, the one they danced to at their wedding. And for a moment, something inside him cracked. What if she was sorry? What if this was a one-time thing? What if he was about to destroy a marriage that still had something left to save? Then his phone buzzed. A message from Sam. Just 3 words. You need to see this. Brian's pulse quickened. He didn't know it yet, but that message was about to turn everything upside down. What did Sam find? Was Melissa hiding even more? Stick around, because in the next chapter, Brian uncovers a twist that changes the game entirely. Brian's heart pounded as he drove towards Sam's apartment. The text still burned on his screen. You need to see this. Sam was his oldest friend, the one who'd helped him set up the hidden camera, and Sam wasn't one to panic. So whatever he found had to be serious. Brian barely knocked before Sam yanked the door open and pulled him inside. Sam's face was pale, his jaw tight like he'd been grinding it for hours. I ran facial recognition on the guy from the video, Sam said, motioning toward his laptop. Brian blinked. You did what? Sam turned the screen toward him. There it was, a DMV profile, then a LinkedIn account, followed by a dozen articles. The man kissing Melissa behind that motel wasn't just a stranger. His name was Derek Lancaster, a married corporate fraud investigator. And not just married. He was married to Melissa's best friend, Angela. Brian stared at the screen in disbelief. Angela, the same woman who hosted Melissa's birthday brunch just 2 weeks ago. The same woman Melissa called her sister from another Mr. The betrayal wasn't just between spouses now. It was between 2 best friends. Sam clicked on one of the articles and scrolled down to a picture from a charity gala. Brian froze. Melissa stood next to Derek in the photo, one hand on his arm, smiling. Her husband, Brian, was nowhere to be seen. She's been in this for longer than we thought, Sam muttered. Brian's head spun. Every assumption he'd made collapsed. This wasn't a random affair. It wasn't a gym fling or some reckless mistake. It was a carefully hidden double life. And the worst part? Angela had called Brian 3 days ago, asking if he thought Melissa had been distant lately. She knew something was off, and she'd played dumb. Was she fishing for truth, or playing her own game? Brian didn't know anymore, but one thing was now certain. He couldn't just confront Melissa. He had to confront both of them, and he had to do it before someone else got hurt. But how do you destroy a web of lies when it's being held up by people you once trusted the most? You'll want to stick around, because in the next chapter, Brian sets a trap so perfect, no one sees the explosion coming. Brian couldn't sleep that night, not from pain but from planning. He sat in his garage, staring at the corkboard he'd hastily put together with Sam's help. Photos, strings, names, motel invoices, phone records. He had all the pieces. Now it was time to set the trap. The goal wasn't just to expose Melissa. It was to make sure everyone involved faced the consequences, especially Derek. And if Angela was in the dark, she deserved to know the truth too. So Brian called Angela. His hands trembled as he waited for her to pick up, not from fear, but from the storm he was about to unleash. When she answered, her voice was calm, unsuspecting, "Hey Brian, everything okay?" Brian didn't flinch. "Not really. I found something I think you need to see, but I need you to trust me and meet me tomorrow morning. No questions. Bring your phone and be ready to record." Angela hesitated. She'd always been direct, and she didn't like being ordered around, but something in Brian's voice made her pause. A tone of finality, a truth pressing at the edge of breaking. "All right," she said. The plan was simple, but brutal. Brian would take Melissa out to a surprise brunch. At the same hotel she'd met Derek. Sam would follow them with a hidden camera. Angela would wait in the lounge, watching live from Sam's feed. Then, at the perfect moment, Brian would excuse himself to the restroom, and Angela would take his place at the table. It had to happen there, in the same hotel, at the same table. Brian wanted her world to shatter in the exact place she thought it was safest to lie. The next morning came fast. Brian didn't speak during the car ride. Melissa smiled and hummed along to the radio, totally unaware. She even leaned over to kiss his cheek. The irony burned. They arrived at the hotel's rooftop restaurant. Melissa's heels clicked across the marble. Like nothing was wrong, Brian kept smiling, masking every ounce of fury behind his calm eyes. Sam was already in place. Angela was watching from downstairs, her grip clenched tight around her phone. As the waiter poured water and Brian reached for his napkin, he muttered, "Excuse me for a sec. I'll be right back." Melissa didn't even look up. "Take your time, babe." Brian walked out without looking back. 30 seconds later, Angela stepped in. When Melissa looked up and saw her, everything stopped. Her face turned white. The blood drained from her lips. And for the first time in a long time, Melissa couldn't lie her way out. Angela sat down slowly, her phone recording every twitch in Melissa's eyes. "Don't worry. I'm not here to fight," she said coldly. "I'm here to watch you confess. Now that's how you corner a liar. But the real explosion, it hasn't even started yet. You won't believe who walks into the room next." In the next chapter, Melissa's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her perfectly painted lips trembled as she looked from Angela's phone to her cold, unblinking stare. There was no escape now, no lies that could patch this. Angela didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Start talking," she said. Melissa looked around the room, as if searching for someone, anyone, to save her, but all she saw were strangers. And Sam, quietly filming from behind a fake newspaper. It didn't mean anything," Melissa stammered. It was just a moment. I felt lost, Derek. He understood me in ways Brian never." "Don't you dare." Angela cut her off. "You don't get to blame Brian for your choices." Melissa's composure cracked. Tears finally streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. But Angela wasn't moved. She pressed record harder, almost like it gave her control. Then the elevator dinged. Both women turned. Brian stepped out. But he wasn't alone. Beside him walked someone Melissa hadn't seen in years. Her own mother. Melissa's body froze. Angela turned to Brian, confused. "What is this?" Brian didn't answer. Her mother, Caroline, approached the table, her expression hard, unreadable. She pulled up a chair, sat down slowly, and placed something on the table. It was a letter. Melissa instantly recognized the handwriting. It was hers, a letter she wrote years ago, when she had confessed to cheating before Brian, before Derek. Angela looked stunned. "Wait, this isn't the first time." Brian finally spoke. "I had to know who I married. So I reached out to the one person you lied to before me." Caroline looked at her daughter with pain in her eyes. "I forgave you once, Melissa. You swore you changed. You begged me to never tell Brian. But you didn't change. You just got better at hiding." Melissa buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably now. Everyone was watching. The waiter, yes, Sam, still recording from across the room. Angela slowly stood up. She glanced at Brian. No words, just a nod. Then she turned and walked out of the restaurant. Brian didn't look at Melissa again. He simply turned to her mother and said, "Thank you for coming." Then he followed Angela out. Behind him, Melissa collapsed into her seat, alone. The letter still lying on the table like a tombstone. But outside that restaurant, something else was happening. Because Brian had one more card to play, and it wasn't just about Melissa anymore. The next chapter will leave you speechless. Don't miss what Brian does next. The street was quiet as Brian and Angela stepped outside. The sun had started to set, casting a golden hue over the buildings. But nothing could warm the cold silence between them. Angela finally spoke. "You didn't just bring her mother here to humiliate her, did you?" Brian shook his head, his eyes scanning the street, as if waiting for something. "I wanted the truth. All of it. Not just for me. For someone else too." Angela narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean, someone else?" Brian didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed her something. A DNA test. 2 names. Brian McAllister and Lucas Daniels. Angela's breath caught in her throat. "Wait, Lucas? That's Derek's son, right?" Brian nodded. "But here's the thing. The test says I'm the biological father." Angela staggered back. "That can't be true. That boy's like 8 years old." "Exactly," Brian said. "I met Melissa 9 years ago. She always claimed Lucas wasn't mine, that he was born before we got together. But that was a lie. She got pregnant, hid it from me, and told Derek it was his. Used the kid to manipulate both of us." Angela's mouth opened, but she couldn't find words. The betrayal had levels deeper than anyone had imagined. "And now?" she asked quietly. Brian's voice dropped. "I want full custody. Melissa doesn't even deserve to see him again." Angela hesitated. "You really think he'll want to come with you?" "He thinks Derek is his dad." Brian's face darkened. "He deserves the truth, and a chance to grow up with someone who actually gives a damn about him. Not someone who lies for sport." Angela slowly nodded, but her mind was racing. Melissa hadn't just cheated. She'd rewritten reality, stolen a child's identity for her own convenience. But just when Angela thought it couldn't get worse, Brian's phone buzzed. He checked the screen. A new message from a contact labeled Hotel Front Desk. He opened it. "Your wife checked in again. Room 1702, same man. Different name this time. Thought you should know." Angela's face went pale as she read it over his shoulder. She's still doing it? After all this? Brian clenched his jaw. "No more warnings. No more playing nice." Angela asked, "What are you going to do?" Brian looked her dead in the eye. "I'm going to room 1702, and this time, I'm bringing the police." But what Brian doesn't know, what nobody knows, is what's waiting for him behind that door. And in the final chapter, everything will flip. You won't believe what happens when he opens it. Stay tuned. The final chapter will blow your mind. Brian stood in the hotel hallway, outside room 1702. His heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. The walls felt like they were closing in. He had rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times. The confrontation, the outrage, the justice, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. He knocked once. No answer. Twice. Still silence. Then the door creaked open. Not by a person, but because it was already slightly ajar. He stepped inside cautiously. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp near the bed. There was laughter coming from the bathroom. A woman's voice, Melissa's voice. Brian clenched his fists and walked deeper in. But when the bathroom door opened, it wasn't just Melissa stepping out. It was Angela, his ex-wife, his supposed ally, wrapped in nothing but a towel. Brian froze. He looked back and forth between the two women. "What the hell is this?" Angela looked just as stunned, but not surprised. She opened her mouth to speak, but Melissa stepped forward first. "I told you," Melissa said coldly. "You think you're smarter than everyone, but you were the easiest one to play." Brian was speechless. All this time, Angela had been helping him dig into Melissa's betrayal, helping him expose the truth. But now she was here, in the same room, part of the same lie. "You two, you were working together this whole time?" Brian asked, his voice hoarse. Melissa laughed. "No, sweetie. We were sleeping together." Angela finally spoke, her voice flat. "You were never going to get custody of Lucas. Not after what you did back in Portland." Brian's stomach dropped. What are you talking about?" Melissa stepped closer, her expression turning deadly. "You really don't remember, do you? That night in Portland, The bar, the girl. Brian's eyes widened. His memories rushed back in fragmented pieces. A woman, a drink, too many shots, a bad decision. Angela pulled out her phone. Don't worry. We kept the footage, just in case. Brian stumbled back, the floor beneath him metaphorically collapsing. It hadn't been about revenge. It had been about control, about trapping him. Everything, from the pregnancy lie to the DNA test, was part of their setup. You never loved me, he whispered. Melissa smiled. Love? No. But you were useful. He looked at Angela. And you? She didn't answer, just stared at him, as if she didn't recognize him anymore. Brian turned to leave, his body trembling. But as he reached the door, Melissa called after him. Oh, and Brian? That kid? Lucas? He's not yours. He never was. The DNA test you saw, it was fake. Brian's hand gripped the doorknob so tightly it turned white. 10 years. A decade of lies, betrayal, manipulation. All wrapped in a bow and handed to him in one final blow. He opened the door, stepped out into the hallway, but not before looking over his shoulder and saying one thing. You both better hope I disappear, because if I don't, this won't be the last time we see each other. The door slammed behind him, and the screen fades to black. But now the question is, what would you do if you were in Brian's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this wild story. And don't forget, sometimes the people you trust most are the ones planning your downfall.